Today on TLC Live, Alfredo Ortiz, President and CEO of the Job Creators Network, where he has led the defense of small businesses from the onslaught of bad government policies. Alfredo has testified before legislative committees about the impact of taxation and regulation of small business growth. He has been widely published in major media outlets and today on TLC. Alfredo Ortiz is also an author and just released his book, The Real Race Revolutionaries: How Minority Entrepreneurship Can Overcome America's Racial and Economic Divides.
I like the title. Anything that says revolutionary, Cubans really like.
Of course, you're Cuban. Alfredo doesn't know that you're from Cuba, and I am from Colombia. Welcome to TLC Live. I'm Andrea Gomez.
And I'm
The Big O.
Orlando Sanchez.
You are the Big O. So we have an exciting show, and I was very excited to have our guest today. I saw him in a Mayor Media talking about his book.
What's Mayor Media?
One of the mayor. I saw him on Fox.
Oh, you mean Major?
Major. Well,
we also have English lessons.
English
here.
lessons 101. So I saw him on Fox and I was like fascinated with his story and talking about the book. And then I started researching about him and I saw him that his company put a billboard last year on President Biden
in Times Square.
In Times Square, and he's gonna talk about that.
So that's got to be an expensive billboard.
Oh my God! But you know what? It was really.
Do we have a picture of the billboard?
We have a picture of we have a picture.
Let's see what it looks like.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Oh my God! Look at that face.
You know what it reminds me?
Read my lips. No new recession. Is the economy stupid?
Okay? You know what reminds me that billboard of our stickers that say, "I did that."
Wait a minute. What stickers?
The stickers that TLC was sending to our members.
I happen to be leaving the house
you
this
always
morning.
Have it. Yeah.
These are very popular now. When you go to the grocery store, you put them in the egg section.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Donde están los huevos?
Donde están los huevos?
So, and we're going to be able to put these back on the gas pumps.
So look, I did that, but Alfredo put that billboard in Times Square. We didn't have the resources to.
By the way, if you want, I did that stickers or yo lo hice. Email us. Go to our website, send us an email, and we'll mail them to you.
But we need to put a billboard in Houston. Hopefully, somebody.
Yo lo hice.
Somebody give us enough resources.
Okay, let's go back because Alfredo, not being on the government dole, meaning he's not on welfare, he's not getting a check from Joe Biden for sitting at home and not working. He's an entrepreneur, so his time is of the essence. So Alfredo, bienvenido, welcome to TLC Live.
Thank you, gracias.
Alfredo, thank you so much for being with us and for responding so fast when I reached out to you in LinkedIn. That was it was an honor to have you here. So let's start talking about your background and your story. I mean, I was reading about your background and your biography that your parents came 50 years ago from Mexico City. But I want to hear from you. You're an second generation immigrant, but you're not immigrant because you were born here. So tell us about your story.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I love those I Did It stickers. So you need to send me a few of those.
We're going to send
it to you.
I tell you, I love those. So kudos to you guys because I always try to figure out who did those. So now I know.
Actually, it was a Hispanic guy from California that started the wave.
Oh, really? Well, that was great. Leave it to a Californian to come up with that, right? But anyways, no. Well, thank you again for having me on the show. And yes, my parents came here from Mexico over 50 years ago. My mom was a housekeeper. My dad was a tailor. And we grew up poor in Chula Vista, California. We used to call it Chula Juana back then. I think they still call it Chula Juana because it's right there pretty much on the border of Mexico and the United States. But, like I said, we grew up poor. On trash day, I used to go around with my mom, and we used to collect aluminum cans and newspapers out of the trash cans, and we'd drive that over to the YMCA. We'd cash that in for grocery money for the week. And whenever we couldn't make ends meet because of that, my mom would have bake sales, garage sales, craft sales, you name it. I mean, I always say that she was the first and best entrepreneur I ever knew. Excuse me. And in fact, I dedicated the book to my mom because all of her efforts, I think, without those, and frankly, with the guidance from God and educators that really took an interest in me, I wouldn't be here today talking to you.
So, Alfredo, your parents, as immigrants to this country, didn't look to government for help.
Not at all. Although, I will say that we were poor because, I remember there were days when we used to go to my local church. It's called St. Rose of Lima. And we actually used to get handouts from the USDA, eggs, bread, milk, and cheese. It was surplus inventories that they would give out. But what my mom did teach me is a work ethic, because what we would do is we would actually greet the truck as they would come in. We would receive it, put all the stuff out, the tables and everything, and then we would help distribute it. And only at the end and very end would we actually take our part. So the part that my mom really taught me there is that if you're an able-bodied person and you can actually give something back, it's okay not to have something. It's okay to need something, as long as you can give something back in return. And so I always remember that. And quite frankly, it's why I don't frown on people who do need assistance, because sometimes people do need a hand up.
No
But
question.
what we don't need is government intervention our entire lives.
So tell us about how did you start your business and how did you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so like I said, I was the first one to finish, high school, college, grad school. I ended up working in corporate 500 executive positions in marketing and finance and market research. I worked in consulting, and then I had enough of all of that, and I decided I would pursue my own dream, have part of my American dream, be my own boss. I believed in myself, and so I started two companies in Atlanta, Georgia. One was a construction company, and another one was a consulting company. And through that, I advanced and was very successful. I sold both of my companies, and to go fast forward to where I am today, I worked 10 years in this organization, Job Creators Network, really advancing the interests of small businesses, because as you very well know, small business in this country really is the backbone of our communities and of our country. We have 30 million small businesses that are actually employing 60 million plus people in this country. So 90 million hardworking Americans are dependent on the success or failure of small business. And so we got to make sure that we do everything possible for those small businesses. And of those 30 million, by the way, 10 million are minority entrepreneurs, representing $2 trillion of wealth in this country on an annual basis. So entrepreneurialism and small business is really critical for many minorities out in this country.
So you testified before the House Ways and Means Committee. I'm hearing. It must have been a shock to find out that for the liberals, that you weren't espousing and promoting affirmative action, government handouts, more regulation, which is what the Democrats want for the economy. What was the reaction?
That was pretty interesting. So after giving, it was about a 4+ hour testimony. I was the sole Republican witness before the entire House Ways and Means Committee. As you can probably imagine, the Dems' reaction was not very positive and not very kind. And in fact, they called me ignorant and inappropriate. And they were very concerned about the rhetoric I was espousing. Despite the fact that I had the background that I did, it was pretty amazing. And actually, that was kind of one of the reasons I decided to write this book, because it actually bothered me so much that, the Democrats would basically try to put down that kind of a background and my perspective, just to espouse their perspective that what we need is more government regulation and more intervention to be able to bridge this racial and economic divide. So they didn't like at all the fact that I said what we need is actually less government, less taxes, less regulation. And trust me, I have traveled over 100,000 miles in this position over the past 10 years, talking to entrepreneurs, most of them actually minority entrepreneurs in this country. And I can tell you this much: not one of them says, "You know what we really need? We need more government, more intervention, and higher taxes and higher regulation."
Yeah, we need the CDC to shut us down when there's a
Yeah,
virus.
exactly.
So let me ask you a question. As you know, Texas Latino Conservatives was founded to deliver a message of economic opportunity, hope, freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, the ability to worship, and to strengthen the family. That government shouldn't be telling our kids that they have a choice in their sex, that alternative forms of cohabitation are acceptable. We want the family to make those decisions. That's our message. That's our purpose.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a phenomenon in Texas where areas that have historically voted for the Democrats, because I understand that back in the 50s and the 60s there was tremendous racism, and that Mexican Americans in South Texas were treated as poorly, if not worse, than African Americans, because at least African Americans had led the charge in civil rights. And so they have historically voted Democrats because for some reason in the South, Republicans let the Democrats kind of switch the narrative in history that all of a sudden the Republicans were the racist, when in fact, if you go back to the 50s when African Americans were trying to register to vote in Alabama and Mississippi, there weren't any elected Republicans. The people actually commanding the water hoses and being the police officers and the county commissioners that were denying the vote to the African Americans were all Democrats. But they, very ably switched the narrative. But what we're seeing in South Texas now with the Mexican American community is this massive shift. And among young Hispanics of Mexican American descent, looking and learning about conservatism. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but the Republican Party, which still advocates and sticks to the principles of individual liberty, entrepreneurship, free markets.
Yeah.
How do we deliver that message to the Hispanic community in this country?
Well, first of all, I applaud you on your efforts because we need to keep doing more of that. And obviously, you see it there in Texas, you see it across the country. We are seeing the massive shift of Hispanics away from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party. We saw it under Donald Trump. We saw it in the last election. They are making that shift. And really, I think the Democrats are their worst enemies when it comes to this because of what they are really trying to espouse. It's just so contrary, I think, to what Hispanics as a culture really believe in: the family unit, religion, the culture, hard work, ethics. Right? I mean, it's just everything pretty much that the Democrats now believe in. Sadly, and good thing for the Republicans, are really contrary again to what Hispanics believe. And I think the best way to actually relate what we believe in and what you believe in is through storytelling. In the book, you'll see a couple of stories that I put in there. A couple of our members, for example, two of them which are in Florida, both restaurant owners. I mean, one came from Cuba, one came from Nicaragua, and you'll hear the challenges that they talk about. And these were socialist countries that their families fled, came to this country in many cases really with nothing, and really were able to believe in their dream, believe in themselves, believe in their families, and really create something that was just amazing for them, for their families. And they both say, for example, in the book, that only in this country really could this happen because these are the kinds of liberties and freedoms that we have, which sadly are really being attacked. And like I said, the Democrats, unfortunately, are not real big believers in small business, I don't think. Because when you look at actually what they're trying to do, they actually are in bed with big business, big government, big business is not really friendly to small business. This one size fits all in terms of regulations, for example, is killer for the small business community. Look at what happened with Dodd-Frank, for example. Back in the banking meltdown, Dodd-Frank was put in place to try to prevent our banking system from ever melting down again and from making our banking system stronger. But what ended up happening is our big banks got bigger and our small banks, basically community banks, disappeared. Almost 2,000 community banks went out of business. That's a heck of a lot of community banks because most of those were in minority communities And so really access to capital, for example, is really been hurt since the Dodd-Frank years in our minority communities.
You say that Democrats can be their own worst enemy, but I flip that around. Sometimes Republicans can be their own worst enemies.
Well, that too.
Yeah, I mean, I look at legislation that's going around the country and the rhetoric, and I too am invited to speak to Republican organizations, whether it's Republican women's clubs or county Republican parties or conservative business leaders. And one of the issues I've been thinking about lately is that I think Republicans need to rewrite the playbook. I mean, we don't need to rewrite the rule book, right? The rule book is freedom, free markets, liberty, the Constitution, limited government. Those are the rules. We're not going to mess with that. But the playbook has to be rewritten. We need to get away. We get away from our history. I tell people because being an immigrant to this country, and I was a refugee from Cuba, as you mentioned. It's the greatest country in the world. But I, in my formative years in high school, I started thinking, well, what party am I a member of? As a young man, I was about, the government helps us, and look, and all the great things the government is doing, and then, as I got older and I went into the university, I saw, well, the government is actually getting us away from our founding principles of limited government. I still remember that the state of New York was the last state to sign on to the Constitutional Convention because they were afraid of a massive federal government. In fact, the Bill of Rights came from New York's unwillingness to sign up to the U.S. Constitution because it gave the federal government too much power. And but Republicans, I tell people all the time, I joined the Republican Party because the party was committed to civil liberties at the time. The party was founded in Wisconsin for the one thing, and one thing only. It was the elimination of slavery. And so we've gone away from that narrative, and now I don't know how we've been painted as the racist party when we never had anything to do. The history of our party is anti-racism, right? And so how do we deliver that message?
Well, it's really great points here. The one thing that the Republican Party does not do well, to your point here, is quite frankly communicate. I mean, we are really bad at communication. We don't do the storytelling well. We quite frankly, we bury people in data because we think that's what we like, so that's what everyone else will like. We forget about the fact that the average level that you want to hit is probably 8th grade education for all Americans, sadly. But in terms of being able to bring out these stories, like I said, is just so critical. Being able to highlight the beauty of these stories. The Democrats, quite frankly, do that exceptionally well. If they want to have a discussion, for example, of $15 minimum wage, they'll find that one clerk, who's been a restaurant cashier for 10 years, right? Who's barely moved a needle, on minimum wage, and how she can't make ends meet and stuff like that. And they make this whole thing about it. And this is the whole country's like that, right? And they do a very good job of that, where we just don't know how to do that. We don't know how to communicate. We get in front of sterile, offices when we're talking about patients' rights and healthcare reform and stuff like that, instead of going to the hospitals and having the minority communities behind us. I mean, there's so much that we could do better from a communication standpoint. To your point, we don't need to write, I like how you said that, the rule books, but the playbook, right? Yeah. When you think of great theater, for example, what makes great theater? It's great actors, it's a great script, right? And then a great set. That's actually what makes great theater. And I have to tell you, the Democrats do this exceptionally well.
They do. They absolutely do. And I was having this discussion yesterday in our offices here in Houston, Texas. I said, we have enough suits in the Republican Party. Here's the problem. The Republican Party and the conservative movement has great stories, as you say, but we're very uncomfortable going into a barrio where most of the workers are wearing, blue shirts with their name and the company that they're hauling
Right.
pipe for on a flatbed. We're just not comfortable doing that. Or going to an
Right.
association we have all kinds of problems in Houston, Texas with crime. In other words, there's a lot of people that are early entrepreneurs, mostly Latinos, that open
Oh,
up
yeah.
taquerias. And
Yep.
at the end of the night, they're hauling $500 to deposit at the night deposit at the bank, and they're robbed. Well, Republicans are uncomfortable going to that small group of taquerias and explaining to them there's better ways to deposit the money, and we're concerned about your
Yeah.
safety. We're better off at a 36-hole country club talking to the same people in the echo chamber. We don't know how to reach out and tell the story, and so
Yeah.
we do need to rewrite the playbook.
Everything is about emotions. I used to work at Univision, and the first thing that they tell us as a journalist, as a reporter, is you need to profile the story. If the story is about economy, so who is the people that is
Exactly.
getting impact? So you need to go and profile, that connect with the audience, connect with the real people. It's real people for real stories, or real stories with real people, and
Yeah.
that's what I think is a disconnection. And it's like it's easier to go to the CEO of the bank or the CEO of the company than, okay, is the CEO of the company, but what that company is doing for regular people. Let's go with the regular people. What is
Right.
impacting to them? And that's what is being the disconnection, and the Democrats are doing a great job on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting just to add to that. It's funny because we like, as Republicans, pulling out our charts and graphs. Because I guess that makes us feel comfortable when we talk about, well, look at the Laffer curve and the supply and demand. In the meantime, the left brings out all these stories about humanity and, to your point, emotion and stuff like that. I mean, we took on, we were a big force in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act fight. We sent about 550,000 letters, for example, to Congress supporting that. But one of the most important things we did is we traveled the country, probably, I don't know, about 55,000 miles, I think, for that effort. We went all across the country, and we promoted and brought out and gave the megaphone and the platform, not to the congressmen in different districts. They were there, but they were actually second fiddle, quite frankly, to the stars of the show, which were the small businesses, the small business owner, right, that would talk about their history, their story, their struggle, right, and their success, but what they would do if they were able to get a tax cut, which is reinvest in their people, their benefits, into their company, and hire more people, right? That is what we did for 6 months leading up to that vote, and I'm telling you, it made a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm reminded that sometimes the Republican Party is kind of like the Dallas Cowboys. We keep handing the game over to the opposition. No, serious. I mean,
Yeah.
who misses 5 field goals in a row, right?
Yeah, but who's the kicker then? Who's the kicker? Tell me.
Exactly, exactly. And let's take immigration for example. I mean, both parties want to pin illegal immigration on each other, right?
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, and I'm not, you can state your opinion. We may be getting a little away from but immigration is here to stay. Everybody, even Republicans, say, well, the country was built on immigrants, the Chinese and the Italians and the Irish and the Mexicans, which is true, And, but, the Republicans don't, I mean, even if you talk about any immigration reform, I don't know if you're familiar with a congresswoman who happens to be Cuban or of Cuban
Maria Elvira
descent.
Salazar.
Congresswoman Salazar from Florida has introduced what's called the Dignity Act, which basically says if you're a family, you're working hard, yeah, you came here illegally, but you've contributed, we'll give you a legal document. We will document you. You will no longer be undocumented. It's not a pathway to citizenship. They don't want to be citizens. In 1986, when the Republicans under Ronald Reagan passed the Immigration Adjustment Act, 63% of the eligible Hispanics to apply for U.S. citizenship never did. They got their green card, and they just wanted to be here peacefully and make a contribution and be able to travel. And so anytime you talk about immigration reform, the old the infrastructure of the Republican Party calls you an open borders organization. I can't tell
Right.
you in Texas how many times we have been called an open borders organization.
Yeah, liberal.
And I mean, we're the furthest thing from an open border organization. I mean,
Wow.
we support Texas Governor Abbott doing what he's doing, meaning putting in the National Guard, making sure there are
Right.
borders protected, shipping the illegal aliens that are coming to the sanctuary cities. We're all for that. We're not open border. But we
Right.
also have to recognize that the demographics of the country is changing. And in Texas, 40% of the population is Hispanic. And so our rhetoric becomes kind of anti-Hispanic, anti-immigrant.
Right.
And so we shoot ourselves in the foot as Republicans. What are we afraid of? That's the new question I'm asking Republicans. What are we afraid of? Because if you're afraid of Hispanics, look at the data, which you point out. The data
Right.
is Hispanics are voting for with us. That, where's our party going to grow? It isn't with Caucasians, which is a diminishing population in the United States. It's with
Right.
conservative Latinos that want liberty, freedom, family, liberty, justice, all of those things. So what are we afraid of, Alfredo?
Well, remember Reagan said it best, right? Hispanics are Republicans. They just don't know. They just don't know it yet, right?
Yeah.
But now I actually think they're realizing that they really are, or at least they realize what they're not, which is Democrats, because they have shifted so far left off the spectrum that they're going, wow. I mean, I can't even believe that we were voting for that party anymore because it looks like nothing like what we used to vote for. And so I think we're seeing that shift. But to your point, I think Republicans do have to be smart about how we talk about immigration and illegal immigration. I mean, first of all, I no way promote illegal immigration. I think that's something my parents did it legally, the right way with green cards and stuff like that. And my mom was an American citizen. When she became about 53 or something like that, and was a proud Republican till the very day she passed away. But what we can have, there are solutions out there, but I really do believe that neither party wants to get to that point where they solve for it, because you know what? There's a lot of money made in lobbying for and against it,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
you but let me just jump in real quick because Milton Friedman, whom I'm sure you're aware of, the famous Pulitzer Prize winning economist, said illegal immigration works only when it's illegal. And there's no truer statement than that. I mean, the
right,
Republican Party has to recognize, and we need to recognize that with illegal immigration and 20 million, maybe 25 million illegal aliens in this country, we're kind of building a permanent underclass, and we don't want that. We don't want that. We
yeah,
want everybody to have access to, paying taxes and the court system and living in liberty and freedom with justice for
And
all.
education.
Yeah, and educate
yeah,
the kids. So we have to be very careful about what we're doing, and we need to resolve
yeah,
this. But you're right. I got to tell you that there are four major industries in this country that do benefit from illegal education, and that is meatpacking, agriculture, construction, and the service industry. Restaurants and maids at
sure,
hotels. And you go to Las Vegas and you see these massive hotels. Not a one of the maids cleaning those hotel rooms, and there's probably 100,000 of them, really speak English, and they're all mostly probably undocumented. And oh, by the way, we hired a subcontractor, so we don't know about their legal status. I mean, we've got to put an end to that.
right. And not to deviate too much, but I will tell you that years and years ago, when I was in my consulting capacity, I was actually tasked to look at illegal immigration and immigration as a whole. And there is actually a solution that I'd like to just float up just for the sake of discussion here. And it's actually something that I call the pathway to earned citizenship. And it actually resembled a lot like a frequent flyer program. The more points you got, the more status you get. So, for example, the more things that are quote unquote American, right? And you can have a list of 30, 40, 50 things, whatever, I don't really care. But you go ahead and group them in priority order and stuff like that. And as you get different, basically check marks next to those tasks and activities, you're in different statuses, whether it's a green card, whether it's resident alien, whatever, up until citizenship. So, as a quick example, I threw out, and by the way, I tested this and it scored extremely well amongst Democrats, independents, and Republicans. But for example, I throw this out. If you are an illegal alien, for example, but you serve your country, you serve this country, does that deserve citizenship? If you serve the military for 5 years, I'll tell you that even the far right wing Republicans that I would talk to say, hey, if you're willing to give your life on the line for this country, that probably earns you citizenship. And so we can have a conversation that reaches some resolution, but I just
No,
don't think there's
I
any.
wholeheartedly agree, Alfredo. But the question is, there's no one pushing Congress to come up with a
Exactly.
plan. And
Right.
it seems to me that it's going to have to be the conservative Latinos, the conservative Hispanics that are now entering the party. We got to have a voice. We got to have, and so I'm proud of, Congresswoman Salazar. We in Texas came up with
Yeah,
our
she's
own
great.
plan.
Great.
We call it family stabilization, meaning Republicans are all about the family, right? So we have hundreds of thousands of families in Texas that live in fear that they're going to be separated from their kids.
Right.
We shouldn't have people living in this country under that fear. So give them those pathways to earn those legal statuses. It doesn't
Yep.
have to be citizenship. Not everybody wants citizenship. I mean, and so it can be a green card.
And
Ours. By the way, ours is a temporary status. In other words, if you
Yep.
haven't violated the penal code, you can apply for a legal status, renewable every 5 years, provided you don't,
Yep.
and you pay all the fees. And by the way, we did
Yep.
a poll in Texas in the 5 largest counties. We polled, red meat primary Republican voters, and they supported it. So again,
Yep.
what are we afraid of?
I'll tell you, the critical word here is earned citizenship. And to your point, many people may not want to be citizens, right? But there is a level playing field that anybody, it doesn't have to be just Hispanics, anybody wishing to enter this country or are here currently, they have the equal opportunity to achieve citizenship, not because they were here an X number of time, which is kind of that amnesty idea, but you actually earn your citizenship again, like a frequent flyer program, right? The more miles you fly, the more status you get. So something that I would love to talk to you, Orlando, about, and maybe the
Yeah, no, I
congresswoman and
agree.
the
That's a
Governor
great
Abbott.
idea. I got to tell you my own story because I'm like thinking to myself, what Alfredo is saying is absolutely correct. If you contribute to this country, why wouldn't we want you? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I complete high school as an immigrant. I didn't speak English language, so I had to learn in the Queen's English in high school and
Right.
college. Then I went into the United States Air Force. Then I went into the Texas Air National Guard. Then I earned my EMT, Emergency Medical Technician certification. I was a volunteer with a EMS system, didn't get paid. I became a little league coach. I became president of my civic club, and I do that because I love this country. I want to give back. So the question
Right.
is, why wouldn't you want somebody like that to be a lawful tax-paying person?
Yeah, absolutely. And add to that, for example, you learn American history. Maybe you pay a monthly fee to your local school district for offsetting some of the. I mean, you name it. You can come up easily. I bet you we could sit down in a couple of hours. We could come up with a list of 50 different items that, as you tick up, right, you come closer and closer to citizenship. Some things automatically qualify you. For example, let's say, like I said, 5 years in the military, right, serving on the front lines. I would say that's pretty big deal there if you're willing to give your life up for this country. But like I said, there needs to be a willingness to do that and a desire to do that. I think, quite frankly, when it comes to this issue, it's too profitable for the lobbyists out there, both for and against, to come a solution. But I'll tell you what, I'll offer up the idea of you and I and anyone else you meet, and Governor Abbott and Congresswoman Sanchez. Let's sit down and let's have a discussion, because I really think that this idea could really be the solution for something that's really been haunting this country for years.
Look, I agree. I mean, I've said to people, we have 2 U.S. senators and we have, I think, 36 members of the U.S. Congress from Texas. We have, between California and Texas, we have a massive congressional delegation. And we can't find anyone in Texas that will advocate, given the 40% Hispanic population, given the percentage of undocumented aliens that we have in Texas, not to mention California, that will lead on the issue. I
And
mean,
Orlando, think about think about this, Orlando. Imagine if it's the Republican Party that actually leads on this issue and comes up with a solution. Good luck to the Democrats trying to call us racist at that point.
Exactly.
I mean, again, we're like the Dallas Cowboys. We fumble and we miss the field goals all the time and turn it over. We turn the ball over to the Democrats. Their rhetoric is better. Their storytelling is better. They're dragging out, the and here's another rhetoric. And Andrea, you may agree that we, as conservatives, as Republicans, repeat that fentanyl is coming in because of immigrants. I have a house in Del Rio, Texas, the hotspot of illegal immigration. And I don't know of any woman carrying a child across the border illegally that's carrying a bag full of fentanyl. Fentanyl is being brought in by organized crime. International,
right?
But Republicans have the rhetoric that it's illegal aliens that are bringing in the fentanyl. Come on.
Yeah, that was really a fumble there for sure, because the reason we should have always said that the reason we need to have tighter border security is because of the fentanyl, the drug trafficking, the human trafficking, the gun trafficking that's coming across our borders through organized crime, the MS-13 gangs, etc. That is what we should have always been talking about, not about these human beings that are coming across trying to make a change in their lives. I mean, the real issue is the organized crime that's actually happening at our borders.
Alfredo, I want to go back to the billboard.
Sure.
I'm curious about why you came out with that idea. What was the impact, and what did you got after that? That probably it was unexpected reaction from you.
Sure. Well, if you go back even years ago, the first billboard I put up, and I'm not sure if you can flip through that or find it at some point while I'm talking here, but it was actually against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC is
okay. We need to look for that.
Yes, and it was great. I'm not sure if you remember, but when Amazon announced that they were bringing in 25,000 jobs into New York City, she led the charge to push them out of New York City. And she achieved that success of pushing them out. And actually, I think they went to, part of them went to Virginia, and part of them, I think, may have gone to Texas or something like that. But she pushed those 25,000 jobs out of, which represented about, $3 billion in wages or something like that. Or $4 billion in wages. And so I actually called her on that and said, basically, what are you doing? I mean, you just cost New York City $4 billion in lost wages.
Because she's a socialist. She's a socialist. There's no doubt in my mind she's a socialist.
Well, and remember, if you remember the specifics on that, it was going to bring in, I think, about $30 billion in estimated revenues to the city and to that area, which right now is really a blighted area. And they were going to give about $3 billion in tax incentives. And she said, how dare they write them a $3 billion check to Amazon? Bezos doesn't need $3 more billion. I'm like, well, first of all, let's do simple math here, AOC. $30 billion in revenues minus $3 billion, your net $27 billion. I don't know, not complicated math, but that sounds like a good deal to me. And so I called her out. She responded on Twitter, and boy, did she regret it, because I went back and forth with her. I used billboards, she used Twitter, and she lost.
Yeah, no, I mean, the concept of incentivizing business is not a new concept in this country. So you know, I don't know what the heck she's thinking about. I mean,
the fact that she even thought that they were really literally writing them a check for $3 billion.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
That's the problem when you elect rookie socialists to government. I mean, here in Harris County, we have elected a young socialist Colombian as a county judge, the head of our county, the third largest county in the United States. First of all, she has fled the country for the last 30 days. Nobody can find her. I mean, we know where she is. She's in Colombia. But she's under FBI investigation. She turned all her power over to a very liberal member of the commissioner's court. He dictates everything that goes on in Harris County. And it's all about, they think about this, Alfredo. Houston is the world's largest medical center. Our biggest employer here are hospitals, teaching institutions, Baylor College of Medicine, the University of Texas Health Science Center, Texas Women's University,
Yeah.
University of Houston, all have medical schools, Texas A&M. This is where the world comes to get cured. Do you know what she did during the pandemic? She decided to spend about $50 million building a hospital in a parking lot of a vacated stadium known as the Astrodome. And then no one used it. And then she and her associates were indicted for directing contracts over towards some very liberal Democrats that have no experience in healthcare. This is the current situation. This is the Democrat playbook. This is the socialist playbook, and we've got to call it out.
So we saw our producer found the billboard of AOC. And that's
There you
the
go.
billboard.
Yep. There we go. So this is it. $25,000 lost New York City jobs, $4 billion in lost wages. We estimate about $12 billion in lost economic activity. And what did we say? We said, thanks for nothing, AOC. And that is the billboard she reacted to. And boy, would she regret it.
So you got a good response from that billboard. So you decide to have another one last year. So tell us about that.
Yeah. We've actually had probably about 36 billboards since then. And we've basically are using it as our main way of getting attention with the media and getting the word out about, in this particular case, was, Biden basically trying to gaslight the American public by basically saying that there was no recession. There's no recession. What are you talking about, a recession, right? When we all knew darn well that there was a recession.
Have you bought eggs lately?
Yeah. Well, at that point, there were 2/4 of negative economic activity, and I'm an economics major by training, right, in undergrad. I know that 2/4 of negative economic growth is technically a recession. So the fact that he just kept saying, "Oh, no new recession," what high gas prices? So we actually even have one where there's a Pinocchio, and his nose was growing.
Yeah.
Let me say something. I don't know if you've noticed this trend, but every piece of bad economic news, now the Democrats are involved in the blame game. Oh, it's the supply chain. Oh, it's China. Oh, it's the bird flu. That's why egg prices. Oh, it's the Ukraine war is driving. They don't tell you that we are energy sufficient and independent. No, they blame it on Russia. That's why the price of diesel is $5 for my F-250 pickup truck. And I'm thinking to myself, we have enough oil in Texas to drive the price down to $1.50 for diesel. And so we blame everybody now. And I just want people to, maybe government ought to take a page out of the playbook at Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines had a complete meltdown during the holidays, left hundreds of thousands of people stranded. You know what they did the other day? They wrote a letter accepting full responsibility. They gave 25,000 miles to everyone affected. They financially reimbursed everybody for reasonable out-of-pocket expenses. And they credited everybody for the legs of their flight that were stranded. To me, that's somebody in the corporate world standing up and saying, we'll take the hit. In America now, the Democrats are like, well, it's everybody's fault but our own.
Well, it's funny. So you'll laugh, but towards the end of last year, we, when all the blame game was really happening with Biden, where it was, to your point, everybody else's fault, you'll laugh, but we put out a press statement saying, hey, good news, the White House is finally going to control the situation. And to do so, he's calling in Santa Claus because of supply chain issues. He's calling in the Easter Bunny, right, for the price of high eggs. And then he's calling in St. Patrick for the rising price of gold, and blaming them and making sure that they figure out how to fix the situation.
No, it's crazy, isn't it? It's bizarre.
So, Alfredo, just before we go, we finish our program, I wanted you to talk about your book. What is the purpose of your book? Why did you decide to write it? And what is the next step with this book?
Yeah, the Real Race Revolutionaries. I encourage everybody to read it. First of all, it's a fast read. I promise you that. I get into some great data without actually, I think, killing people and having their eyes rolled to the back of their heads with data. But I think it's really powerful because it actually challenges a lot of the current rhetoric that the Democrats have that basically says that racism is systemic in this country, and the only way to get over and through that is through government intervention, is through reparations and stuff like that. Where I pushed back and I referenced the testimony that I gave before the full House Ways and Means Committee last spring, where I did challenge that rhetoric, and I said, no, what we don't need is actually more government and more regulation and more intervention. What we need is less. We need you to get out of the way. Entrepreneurs, small business owners do what they do best, which is innovate, which is hire, which is create, right? And let them be part of that American dream and use entrepreneurialism to bridge that gap. I mentioned the 30 million small business owners that exist in this country, 10 million of those minority small business owners that represent $2 trillion in net worth. I point out, for example, a one data point, a Black Caucus Foundation study that found that the net worth, listen to this, the net worth of a Black entrepreneur is 12 times greater than the net worth of a non-entrepreneur Black. So that means that we don't really need that government intervention, right? If you believe in yourself, you believe in your dream, you believe in your vision, right? You can have that American dream, right? And work your way out through hard work and ethic and integrity and grit, right? And make something of yourself, because that's what this country allows, right? It's the great opportunity project, is what we call it, is this country, right? Nobody flees the US. Everybody comes into the US fleeing socialist countries because this model works. And what we need is the government to get out of the way.
And now that you mention that, let me just remind folks that are watching is that just about every major urban area in the United States, New York City, Chicago, Seattle, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, are run by liberal Democrats. And if you look at the school districts, I'm going to point out Houston, Texas, the second largest school district in the United States. It is a failing school district. There's so much acrimony. The Board of Trustees steals the public money. We have 5 failing schools. And yet, when the education commissioner in Texas, under legislation authored by an African-American Democrat in the state of Texas, says failing schools can be taken over by the commissioner of education. They fought us. They fought us on that, went to the district courts. So they perpetuate a failing system for our future, our urban kids. I don't know how anyone with good conscience can continue to promote a failing school district, which, by the way, the highest tax rate in the state of Texas is a school tax. How can we continue to fleece urban taxpayers and provide a crappy outcome for urban kids? So we're setting them up for failure. But again, it's the playbook of the Democrats. Why? Because those kids that fail to join the modern economy in the 21st century are going to look for government for help. We got to stop that.
Well, and I'll tell you on this really quickly on the topic of education. I mean, let's actually look at the real problem, right? It's the head of the snake, which is Randy Weingarten, the AFT, the NEA, right? Those policies come all the way from the top and work all the way through our school systems, all this wokeism, teaching kids, that they don't have a gender and stuff like that. It's all coming from the top. We need to address that situation because there are 55 million kids, right, where our school system is failing them because we're more focused on that than we are on teaching them STEM, for example. Everything that, used to make our country great. We were the pride of, the envy of the world in terms of education system. We were number one. Now we're pretty much last in the, the developed countries. And so we really do need to address that.
But let me address this. Republicans have had a majority in the U.S. Congress, both the House and the Senate. why haven't we abolished the Department of Education? Where in the Constitution does it say that the federal government needs to dictate education for the 50 states? I always thought that education was a state privilege. So again, our playbook is a little out of whack, and not to pick on our friends up north in Dallas, but we have become the Dallas Cowboys, although our Houston Texans are no better. So listen, thank you.
I was going to say, just really quickly, one more thing though. Shame on us though, because as Republicans, we also ceded control of all of our local school districts, city council members, mayors, all those officials. We ceded that to the Democrats, and we are suffering now because of that. By the way, kudos out to Governor Youngkin out in Virginia, because he is taking control of the education system, and same with Governor Reynolds out in Iowa.
No question. Let me just say, I've said this before, and I'm going to repeat it. In Texas, Republicans have crossed their arms and walked away from public education in urban areas. Period. End of story. Yep. And it's the biggest mistake we can make. Our rural, suburban education systems are still pretty darn good. But I always say, if Republicans want to make inroads and recapture the imagination and the hearts of urban voters, which still give, do things. Urban health care, for example, diabetes, type 2 diabetes and obesity in Texas is out of control. What are we doing to address that issue? Public education in urban areas is a disaster. What are we doing? Why are we walking away from those true challenges? Again, because the suits are very comfortable, sometimes in the country club, and don't want to go to comerciantes Latinos and talk to the truck drivers who are driving low beds and flatbeds in the oil industry.
Right. No, we can do better.
We can do better.
Alfredo, call to action before we let you go. Tell us about how Job Creators Network can help other small businesses, and how your book can also help small business owners.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity for that. Joinjcn.com, joinjcn.com. If you go to our website overall, jobcreatorsnetwork.com, jobcreatorsnetwork.com, you'll see all the activity there that we have in terms of advocating for small businesses. And we're not just advocating for Republican small businesses. We're advocating for all small businesses in this country, whether you're left, center, right, green, yellow, blue, black, brown. I don't really care. If you're a small business, you get our advocacy, and we need to do more for our small businesses. They're the heartbone. They're the backbone of our communities. They're the backbone of our country. We need to do more of those. We have at the end of last year, alongside with Newt Gingrich and I, the former Speaker of the House, we actually launched an 8-point plan called the American Small Business Prosperity Plan. We encourage people to go to our website and learn more about that. 8 points that are critical, simple overall in terms of DC standards, but things that we can actually put our arms around and actually achieve. And if we do that, I'm telling you, it's going to be game changing. And if you can go to Amazon.com to get my book, The Real Race Revolutionaries, I encourage people to read that as well. It will help you with the narrative of pushing back on the Democrats, I promise you.
By the way, I'm assuming you travel and speak across the country, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to extend an invitation to you, not on the air, but we'll get back with you. We have an annual awards ceremony here in Texas, which is a big deal. As you may not know, but we got the state of Texas to recognize the contributions of what we call Tejanos. Tejanos are the traditional old Mexican Americans that, fought in the Revolution for Texas. And now every year we honor Tejanos in Texas by a resolution by the Texas legislature. So Texas Latino Conservatives has a big award ceremony every year where we give out the Tough Tejano Award for someone who's made a significant contribution to conservatism and the principles of the founding of this country. So we want to invite you, and we want you to give serious thought to that. And so we'll reach out to you. But hey, again, thank you for your leadership. I mean, it's going to require people like you standing up and telling the story to the community, and making sure that, as you, I think, agree, we improve education, we improve access to health care, not by virtue of government intervention, but by virtue of private sector initiatives.
Oh yeah. By the way, if I could do one more quick plug on our website, we actually did a huge initiative on healthcare as well. It's called Healthcare for You. Please look at it, look it up. It's a great initiative. I'm telling you, it's better than anything that's out there. Obamacare, anything. It's Republican led. It goes back to patient centric, and we need to do that as well.
You know, Alfredo, it's
That's
funny you
awesome.
say that because tell me again the name of the program.
Healthcare for You.
Healthcare for You. Do you know that last year we organized in Texas, and we're going to do it in Dallas, a program called Salud a Ti, Healthcare to You, and
Well,
so
this,
we're trying to tackle obesity and type 2 diabetes, which is expensive, as you know, in the healthcare system. And I'm trying to
yep.
get conservative leaders to focus in on that. I mean, if Republicans could say, okay, there's a problem among, minority kids and across the country, but in Texas, we could save a hell of a lot of money. I mean, this is
All right. Look,
preventative.
look I'm actually a type 1 diabetic myself, and so I know how expensive it is. I'm telling you right now, the reason why it's not actually being solved for it, it could be, is because it is very, very profitable. I'm telling you, as a type 1 diabetic, I know how much it costs to be a diabetic.
Wow. Well,
Well,
Alfredo, thank you so much. It was delight having a conversation with you. And of course, this is not going to be the last time. We're going to reach out to you, and hopefully
Thank
we
you.
can do things together with TLC and with you, Alfredo.
and hopefully we'll see
Sounds
you in
great.
Dallas for our Tough Tejano Award if the Cowboys don't block us.
Hey, if my calendar works, I'd be honored to do that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll talk later. Thank you so
All right,
much,
thank you.
Alfredo.
Bye bye.
Wow, fascinated.
You're fascinated, but he was fascinating.
No, I'm fascinated finding fascinating guests.
Ah, yeah. Well, very good guest. And that's the type of leadership that we need in the conservative movement is people that are willing to, get out of the comfort zone, get into the barrios, as we call it, and talk to the entrepreneurs that, as you know, a growing percentage of them are Hispanics, but we also have a burgeoning African American and Asian entrepreneurial community. And again, small business is the way to succeed in this country. But we talked about a lot of other topics. I mean, you don't have to have a formal college education to succeed as an entrepreneur, but it helps. And it helps to have a good education system. So there's a lot of issues that all intertwine that work together to make sure that entrepreneurship and free markets are successful in this country. Education, healthcare, and we need to get our government back to addressing those issues.
And talking about going to the barrio, we have this coming weekend, Friday and Saturday, our boot camp in Leadership Latino. We're looking for any person that wants to run for office and
Or lead.
and wants to go to the barrio to talk to their community. To come to our Leadership Latino this coming Friday, January 27 and January 28. It's completely at no cost, meaning completely free. It's going to be here in Houston, and it's a boot camp campaign. We're looking for people that want to be leaders in their community, want to run for office, conservatives. We're looking for Latinos conservatives, but anybody, even if you're not Latino, but you just want to be the voice of your community, you're more than welcome to join us in the 2-day campaign boot camp. And it's going to be here in Houston this weekend, completely free. We're covering the hotel if you're coming from out of town, or also we're covering up to $200 of transportation if you want to.
So we cover your costs.
We're covering your costs. Exactly.
And boot camp, I got to tell you, having been through the military, we also call boot camp basic training. And that's what we do in this Leadership Latinos. We give you basic training about how to get involved and become a leader in your community. You don't necessarily have to run for city council or governor or president of the United States. You may want to become a precinct chairman in your community. You may want to become a volunteer or run a campaign for a candidate. You may want to become a fundraiser. You may want to become a spokesperson for a candidate. We will teach you the basics. But for those that want to be candidates, you're going to walk away with a profile, a headshot. You're going to walk away with a template for a website. You're going to walk away with how to file your treasurer designation with the Ethics Commission or your local filer. So you're going to have the basics, the basic structure of how to run a campaign, how to lead. So if you want to learn those basic things, come to our program. And as Andrea said, we'll cover expenses.
So go to leadershiplatino.com or texaslatinoconservatives.com. You're going to find all the information, but also the form how to register for this amazing boot camp that we're going to have this weekend here in Houston.
Don't forget to donate. Everything that we do is based on the generosity of Texans.
And become a member.
You can become a member, but you can go to our donate page, and there you can, give us $5 or you can give us $50,000. We put it to good use. We have very little overhead, and we're making a difference in the state of Texas and in the country. So help us out. We rely on the generosity of our contributors to keep it going. God bless, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Nos vemos el próximo miércoles. Bye-bye.